Here in Adobe After Effects 2022, what I could do is use another effect here called Repetile, and what it's going to do, I'm just going to make a quick composition, 1920, 1080, 24, 20 seconds, that's fine. I'm just going to use Repetile I'm going to make a small pattern, I'm going to repeat it using Repetile. Instead of making a massive pattern or something larger in Photoshop, Illustrator, or even something here right in After Effects, I can make a small version of it and then just have it repeated. It's kind of like step and repeat in Illustrator or InDesign or even Photoshop, where we could just make something small and then it could just get repeated. So let's try that out. This is my main composition, but I'm going to make a new composition on top of this. So I'm going to create new composition, but I'm going to make this composition really small. Let's make it a quick like 100 by 100 pixels. Something rather small, because then I'm just going to have it repeated. But I'm going to keep it the same frame rate and the same duration. Actually, the duration doesn't matter. Let's make it even smaller. Let's make it 5 seconds. Okay, there we go. So it's a little bit smaller. And you know what? Even for this, I'm going to add a new solid background layer. So new solid, and it's going to be black, which is fine. 100 by 100, exactly what I want. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to make some circles. So I'm just going to grab my rectangle tool, hold down my right click or my left click, hold down the ellipse tool, click on it, and I'm just going to make some circles. And there's my one circle. Now obviously that's not what I want. I don't want a stroke, so I'm going to get rid of that stroke. And I do want a fill. Let's just make it white, doesn't really matter. We can play around with this later, of course. So I'm just going to put one up here, make it a little bit bigger. One here. Now it does matter how I align these, but I'm just going to kind of play it by ear and see what happens. I'm going to duplicate that. I could do it, actually I could duplicate the layer itself, or I could duplicate the ellipse inside the layer. So let's try that out. I'm going to hold down, click on the ellipse here, Command D, and I just duplicate the ellipse inside of the shape layer that's already there. And I can move it over. I'm going to do the same thing. I could select both, actually, Command D, and I've duplicated both of them. And let's just say that's how I want it to look. Now it's going to repeat, this Repetile is going to repeat for me exactly what it sees here. So we could even change these up later on, it doesn't really matter, but I kind of want to get them close or decent to what I think would work, and I'm going to leave it at that for now. Great. So I have this done, it's good. And what I should have done, I should have called this properly. So this is going to be my let's just say my circle pattern setup. I always like to do that. And this other comp is going to be like just my main background that I'm going to put together there. So there I go. And now within my main background, I'm going to place this circle comp, and there it goes. Where is it? Sorry, circle setup. And I place it in, and there it is. That's it. So it already has a black background on it. I could add a black background to this composition myself if I wanted to, but it has this. Let's just see how this works. So it's aligned in the middle. Okay, so I'm just going to go up to my effects and type in rep. Or I could just type in tile and I get CC Repetile, and that's all I want. So I'm just going to click on that and double click on that here, and now I could place that effect onto this composition. So there it is, Repetile, and let's see what it does. Expand right, expand left, expand down, expand up. So let's play around. I'm going to expand it, and look what it starts to do as it expands to the right. Okay, now it only goes 400, but I could obviously type in much more. Let's type in 2000, see what that does. Okay, it adds more. Let's do the same to the left. All right, so it's just repeating itself over and over and over again. Great. Now what I'm going to do is expand down. Let's try 1000, see what that does. Okay, and we'll expand up 1000 as well. Great. And I can just play around with how I want it to be repeated. If I want to flip the horizontal, flip the vertical, a lot of different options here. And you know, if I want to kind of create a brick pattern, or there's a lot of different options here we can kind of create with the brick, but I'm just happy with that with this. But once again, I do want to show you what I can do still, even if I wanted to go back into my circle pattern setup. So you know what, I'm back inside here. I was like, I'm going to get rid of that black background, and I'm just going to keep it white. Okay, well, let's do that. And remember, we don't have to save our comps. We just go back to our main comp, and there it is. Well, I was like, it's still there, but what I could do here, maybe I just want that to be the circles, and I'll create a new solid layer here. I'll make it black, say okay, and I'll drop it down here, and now I have that black background. So now it's in this particular composition. And that's it. That's kind of all we have to do. Now, realistically, if I wanted, I could actually make a little bit of motion here. Now, you know, number one, let's bring this down. It's pretty intense, so I'm going to bring down that opacity. Now, if I bring down the opacity of one of that, it should bring down the opacity of all of it, which it does, which is great. Great. Okay. And now what I can do, I could kind of make like a moving pattern here, which is pretty cool. So let's play around with that. Now let's see how far we can go. So my position is here. I was playing with my Y. Let's play with my X. I'm just going to move around the X position and see how far it can go. Okay, that's pretty far. So let's just start right there, because I'm going to move it this way. So this is kind of the edge of where it stops. Now remember, the Repetile, I could have even more. I could add even more if I wanted to go even farther, but right now I'm fine with that. So let's do a little position, and I'm going to just quickly add my little anchor point position. I'm going to drag it over pretty far. Maybe to the 10-second mark, the 10 frames, and I'm going to then add another keyframe, but this time I'm going to have my it doesn't go all the way. That's right, I only made it 5 seconds, that last one. So let's extend it. So I'm going to double click on it. Yeah, it's only 5 seconds. That's okay. So let me go to my composition settings, and now let's make it 10 seconds long. All right, 10 seconds, great. So now I could edit what I have here. Great, I can see everything. And I see it only still goes up to that 10-second mark, so I better extend everything over, even my black solid, even though it's shut off. I'm still gonna do, and now once again, I don't have to save it. It saves on its own. Whatever happens here, now it's gonna appear in my circle panel. So yeah, there we go. So now I see it goes up to the 10-second mark now. Well, it kind of stopped there, so let me extend the rest of it. There we go. And now it goes up to the 10-second mark. There it is. Okay. So I see my, let's see what happened here. Okay, there it was. It moved. Let's bring this back in. There we go. Okay, so I have that there, and this I want it to move. So let's move that X over this way, all the way as far as we could. But once again, I could always add more if I want more on that side. Great. And that's it. That's our kind of moving background, if you will. Kind of slow, subtle, nice and easy. Now, we do notice something that we're kind of like, well, it's a pattern, but it's kind of grid-like, where I see the 4 and the 4. It's not really spread out so nicely. So let's kind of fix it up. So I can go back here. I'll turn back this on my background so I can see it. And let's move these objects individually. So let's move this one, down and out a little bit. Down and out. Down and out. Up and down, there we go. And once again, don't have to save it, it's already saved. And whatever happens there happens here. So once again, it's not really lining up properly, but I could always go back in and adjust. Let's do something else here. Instead, I'm going to bring this back in individually. Click on one, bring it in. Click on the next, bring it in. Okay, and now you know what? I'm going to play around even more with this. What I'll do with this particular one, I'm going to change the fill. I'm going to change the color to red for some reason, and this color to another color for some reason. Anything I want. There we go. If I go back in, once again, it changes everything and kind of playing around there. Now creating another kind of interesting pattern there too. So there's so much we could do with this, and the Repetile allows us to change it. Allows us to repeat anything we want from our top and our bottom, our left and our right, and then we can create these interesting patterns, and so much more we could do with that as well. So hopefully you can use Repetile to create some interesting backgrounds as well. All right, another way to do that, actually, it's very similar, is to use something called the motion tile. It gives us a bit more, a few other options, I should say. So with this, I'm just going to duplicate that last circle pattern I had. I'm going to shut the other one off, and I'm going to throw out the effects I had on that Repetile effect I already had on there. I'm just going to click on it, delete it, gone. I'm going to add in motion tile, but before I do that, I did have those few things set up. I'm going to get rid of this position, and I'm going to reset everything so it's right in the middle. But I am going to lower that opacity at least to 50%. Let's just see what that does. And I'm going to bring in motion tile. So I'm going to click and drag that on top of the circle pattern setup again. And this time, let's see what this does. So I could change the center of the tile inside of that little 100 by 100 I had already. So if I had this actually 1920 by 1080, this original one, this would make it a little bit different, which is totally fine. It doesn't really matter because we could play around. Tile width and tile height. Let's play with that a little bit later. Let's look at the output width. So if I move this, look what happens. Very similar to Repetile, except this time it's going to move it a little bit further on both sides, the full height and width. So let's extend that to say like 2000. Okay, so it goes a little bit further. And same with our output height. Let's extend that all the way. And now let's bring that up to, let's say 1500. Okay, so now I have that full pattern that covers, and I can change up a few things now. Let's look what tile width does. Okay, I'm just going to move this and see what this does. Okay, it kind of brings in the width, the original width of what that setup was. Okay, so that's kind of interesting because it does create something interesting there too. A different kind of pattern if that's what you're looking for. And tile height the same. It's going to just increase or decrease. So it's going to give you your 100%. And if I wanted to stretch that down, I could do that too. Okay, and I could do those obviously if I wanted to do them at the same time. So let's say I want to go 50% here and 50% here. I could do that, and it just makes it smaller, which is really cool as well. Now let's look at all this. It was that mirror edges. Well, if I mirror the edges, I get to actually flip them if I want to flip the way that they look. So that's another way to kind of play around with that. And the phase. Now if I watch the phase, I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. I could actually move this around and watch what happens. A little bit slower. I could actually change up how they mirror and how they actually, the columns work with each other and how they could offset. So let's just do a 90 degree, and I could have that set up just off center, which is really, really cool way to do that. And kind of have some fun with that horizontal phase shift, and I can change it that way as well. So there's actually a lot we could do here with this as well, and there's kind of no difference in terms of what we could do with our animation of our background and different things like this. So it's a pretty cool effect, but let's go one step further. Let's click on our circle pattern setup again, and now this time let's do a little animation here. So if I do an animation here, it should affect my background. Now let's do that, and let's see what could happen here. What could I do? Well, you know what? Let's do some opacity switches, and I'm just going to click on my, well, if I do my full opacity switch, what would happen is if I do a full transform here, well, it's going to change everything, each circle at the same time. Or if I made them each separate layers, I have more control over the opacity, which is pretty simple to do. But instead, what I can do, because the background is black and it happens to be black on here as well, maybe I'll do a little bit of a change to a color. So I'll have these change to black and kind of flicker in and out. Let's play around with that, see what happens. Because they are fills, I'm going to change the first fill. So I'm going to click on my color, which is currently red, and I'm going to change it to, let's do a quick change to black. And I will change that back to its original again. So I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to paste it right there. So I'm just going to go back, and we could do that over and over and over again. Okay, so let's leave that at that. So red, black, so I could copy those and continue to copy those over and over all the way down. If I copy all those, bring those over a little bit further, my next frame, and continue. Okay, so what should happen with that one? Let's take a look. It should just keep fading out, red and black, red and black. Okay, it's kind of like an opacity, but because the background is black, I'm just making it go black, which is totally fine. We're just kind of playing with that. But realistically, I could have also just looped it, but that's okay. I'm gonna add one last one over here. There we go. Okay, now I'm gonna do the same thing to my next fill, and I'm just gonna play around with the color once again. And right now, I'm going to do the same thing, and I'll take this white and bring it to black. But what I did with this one, I'm just going to off-center it just a little bit so it doesn't flicker at the same time, just to kind of shoot off at different times. But I'm going to continue with my next one as well. Now they're all moving at the same times. What I did there, because these ones are also going white to black, and this one is always white to black as well, I literally just copied these, pasted them right here when I selected color, pasted them in, and did the exact same thing. Now I'm going to do the same thing here one more time, last time, go to my fill. Now let's see how this looks. Alright, that's it. They're kind of flickering in and out, so let's see what happens now. Once again, don't have to save it, just go back to my main background. Let's see how this animation looks. Pretty interesting how we can play with our compositions, play around with that Repetile, and play around in general here with motion tile, Repetile, compositions, and some simple effects that could really create something interesting here. Once again, if that's a little too much, but you want to have a little bit of that happening, bring down the opacity a little bit more so it doesn't overwhelm, and it can create some kind of interesting background, that's for sure. Let's go one step further. Let's now play around with a little bit of blur. So let's go to blur. All right, and let's go to Gaussian blur, and And let's drag that over top of here as well. So now I have an extra effect motion tile. Now I have Gaussian blur as well. Well, right away, I can twirl that down and look at blur or Gaussian blur and add some blur. And once again, realistically, it's only attaching it to one tile, but it's going to kind of play around, and whatever's happening to one tile will happen to all the tiles because of motion blur. So pretty cool way to play around with that. All right, let's zoom out and see what we got. And we'll bring up our opacity a little bit more so we can see that. All right, that's it. That's all, just kind of having some fun here, playing around. Once again, it's still a little overwhelming for depending on what we want to do, if we want to overlay some type on there or a picture, an image, whatever. But we could definitely have some fun with this and just keep adding effects on top of effects on top of effects and create some pretty amazing stuff.